Welcome everybody to Linux Academy, brought to you by Pinehead TV. My name is Terry, and over the course of the next several videos we will be covering file system maintenance, file system utilities, and file system exploration using various tools for all distributions. So let's get started. So while we update our system, as we always start, up until this point we've been dealing directly and only with utilities that deal with our file system if it happens to be an ext2, 3, or 4 file system. We're briefly going to look over some of the tools that are available and install them for XFS file systems. And XFS, because it hasn't been used as a standard in some time, is not generally available as part of the default install on your system. So whether you are running an RPM or a Debian-based distribution, you'll probably have to search for and install two programs. One is the collection of XFS programs called SFX Prog, and the other one is the XFS dump utility. In our case, we're going to run a sudo apt-get install XFS dump, XFS progs, and that will install the programs and utilities on our system, as well as the ability to create and mount XFS file systems. XFS is an older file system that was more or less standard back in the day. It does offer some advantages for file systems that use lots and lots of small files, but for the most part is in sporadic use at this point in time, ext 3 and 4 being the most common. So we have a USB key that we've previously created an XFS file system on that we're going to go ahead and mount to the temp directory. And we're going to look at the file systems that are available on our system and see that XFS is indeed one of the file systems that we can mount on our server, which is why we're able to create and mount a XFS file system. So we know we have the utility XFS dump. So let's take a look and see if we can figure out where XFS dump is installed. So if we run a witch on XFS dump, it says it's in user sbin. Again, because it's not a standard system set of binaries, it's not in the sbin directory, but it's in this case it's in user sbin. So there's several utilities that we have access to for our XFS file system. So let's take a look at one of them called XFS_check. XFS check will allow us to check the file system consistency for our XFS file system. So it's the XFS equivalent of FSCK, and it has most of the same utilities and command line parameters for checking file systems. And you'll also notice that, like FSCK for our ext2, 3, and 4 file systems, it cannot check the file system integrity on a mounted file system. So what we're going to do is we're going to unmount dev sdb1, which is mounted on mount temp, and then we're going to run XFS check. Well, what does it tell us? It's an older set of utilities, so in this case, because there's nothing wrong with our drive, it's not going to tell us anything. So let's take a look at XFS dump and see if we get any better information out of that. So if we run XFS and _check on dev sdb1, let's try verbose mode. Okay, so that gives us a bunch of information on all the individual inodes, and since I know this is a 1 gig XFS drive, you'll see that we're setting all of the blocks on all of the inodes on the drive to free. It's showing that those inodes are free. We're going to interrupt that because we know that there's nothing on this drive at this point in time. So that gives us a little bit more information than we probably want. So let's take a look at XFS dump and see what we can find out specifically. We can find out, again, you'll notice most of these parameters look familiar from an FSOC perspective. Whether it's verbosity, but we can control size, we can look at superblocks, we can check directories, we can dump out the contents to a log file, display them to the console. But if we run XFS-H like FSOC, it will give us all of the command line parameters that we can use for our XFS file system. So if we run XFS-8, we can see we can dump the DMF state, we can run the help, or we can list everything out to a log file or the terminal. So let's remount this drive and see what we can figure out with XFS dump here. So let's try to take an actual dump of the file system. And by dump, that it basically means a backup. So if we go to back up the XFS drive, we need to back up the contents of the drive into a backup file. So it's not quite the equivalent of a tar, because it's a binary dump, or more or less a binary image of the XFS file system. Now, I got this in the wrong order, so you need to do J to make sure that you pull the journal for all of the extended attributes for your external file, or for your file system, as well as -F, which says all files, all directories. We're going to take it, name it My Backup. The media label is My USB XFS. And we see that the mount temp directory, which is my XFS file system, has a file called test XFS on it. We've just taken a dump of that entire file system into a file we wrote to my home directory. So let's go ahead and remove that file. And then if we do a restore, a -T-V for verbose, silent means I don't need to know every inode that's being written. Let's restore that file system, the journal, the file. This is the dump file that we're taking it from. And we're going to restore it back to the directory that we took the backup from. So we're using the same parameters to restore as we wrote, as we used to write, but we're reversing the file and the directory. And now if we look, we can see that we have the test xfs.txt directory left. XFS copy will allow you to do, it's kind of like an RCP command between XFS file systems, but it does it at the inode level. You'll see that we can look at some of the performance statistics for XFS IO. We can grow a file system if we've created a file system that has growable space. And XFS admin will allow you to do things like set and read the UUID and the label for your drive, much the same as tune E2FS and debugfs allowed us on ext 2, 3, and 4 file systems. So if we do xfs_admin-L on dev-sdb1, we see that it does not have a volume label at this point. A -L then will allow us to set the volume label, again on an unmounted file system. This is mounted, so we need to unmount the file system in order to make any changes to it. So once we set that volume, then -L is to set, -lowercase l is to review. So we're going to name it My Data XFS. Now if we run that same command with a lowercase, we see that the label is now My Data XFS. Again, the admin, the copy, these are some of the utilities that you'll use along with XFS dump to manage your XFS file system. They're in user bin, and they directly relate to the commands that we've already gone over for ext2, 3, and 4 file systems. My name is Terry for Linux Academy, brought to you by Pinehead TV.